need the old BladeRunner.
The chance to begin again.
He say you BladeRunner.
Got the wrong guy, pal.
I don't work here anymore.
Welcome to Cocktail Cinema, folks, your weekly movie review podcast where we pair movies with craft cocktails. As always, I'm your first favorite bartender and third favorite author, Josh Price, and I am joined by my co-host, Greg, and our producer, Shasti.
Damn glad to be here, as always.
How we doing?
Good.
Well, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this week, and I'm going to start with a joke.
Wah, wah.
No, it's not my salary. It's, so when you lie to your girlfriend and you convince her that she's crazy, that's called gaslighting. But when you lie to your girlfriend and you convince her that she's a robot, that's called blade running. That's a Philip K. Dick move.
Nice. There you go.
So that said, we are covering Blade Runner this week.
He say you BladeRunner.
This movie came out in 1982. It was directed by the great Ridley Scott. Had a budget of $30 million, but a box office return of only $41.6 million. So, yeah, not as big of a smash as I expected at the time, but it is still a very well-known movie. And I think the discussion on the table is it a good movie? Does it deserve to be known?
Isn't that what we do every week, Josh?
Exactly. You understood the assignment, too.
Oh, my goodness. Something just came to me. I was like, what have we been doing all these weeks?
Yeah.
All these years?
So this is one of those movies that I think, even if you haven't seen it, most people have a general idea of the basic plot. You know, it's kind of bred into the cultural consciousness.
Yeah.
The zeitgeist, if you will. And a lot of that has to do with the fascination with the future from the 80s. You know, science fiction had kind of a rebirth in the late 70s and early 80s that included the adaptation of a lot of works of science fiction. So we saw, I believe there was a War of the Worlds there. We had the Time Machine, and you know a lot of the works of Philip K. Dick were at least pitched, and this is one of them. So Blade Runner is based on it's loosely based, inspired by a book by Philip K. Dick called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?"
And found in the lower right-hand corner of your screen.
The silhouette.
And I read this book junior high. Didn't really understand it a whole lot, but I also saw the movie around the same time. My dad was a big fan, so I grew up watching this movie. Greg, you had kind of a different experience with it, did you not?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that I'm kind of green to the sci-fi expertise. I mean, there's no denying that.
Craig and his dad were watching different movies.
No, my dad loves this kind of stuff too. It's just that it was never really kind of my shtick, you know.
True.
I took a lot from this movie as far as how the painting was pictured, the still shots, the balance between those, and you know the depth of those, and the lens.
Lens flares,
man. That was pretty much the whole theme for me of this movie. Was like it was a lot of that, and I thought that kept the pacing really well because it was very on the second, every 2 second kind of thing during those parts. But one thing that lacked for me with this one is I know we're dealing with bots and stuff like that, but there was not a lot of plot growth. No overall challenges. We've kind of talked about this too. There was really no archetype. You know, there's no good guy, no bad guy. Really no battle other than kind of just dealing with one's own humanity.
It's a very philosophical film, and like it's structured somewhat as an action noir. But for the most part, it is really just a philosophical discussion about what makes you human. Because you know the idea that Harrison Ford's character Deckard is like his career was to retire or kill, depending on how you look at it, these robots that may or may not have had some semblance of humanity. And I like that you brought up that there's no villain, because a lot of people like to talk about Roy, like the lead android, as the villain. But for me, he's not.
He was scary.
He's very intimidating.
Yes.
And he's capable.
And my favorite character through the whole film, actually. You know,
I agree.
He was awesome. I mean,
absolutely. And he gets some of the best dialogue. And he really gets the chance to dig into this concept between him, and what he has to say, and what we see with Rachel, they really drive home this theme of humanity,
Right.
and it somewhat with like the animals and is this a real owl, is it a fake owl kind of thing. There's a lot more expanded on in the book, but it's fascinating to me, and it's one of the things I love about it the most. It's not for everybody, but it was definitely for me, and especially at that age where it got me. I'm an empathetic person.
Right.
We've discussed my bleeding heart left and right.
Well, as am I, but in different cases, different scenarios for me, for sure. But you're not wrong. It's not just for you, though. Don't put yourself in this.
Oh, this movie was made
willow
specifically
room
for Josh.
It wouldn't have created the stir that it did if it wasn't for everyone. This movie, like you said, is well known. It's mentioned along some of those early '80s sci-fi as one of the best works as far as camera work goes. Not taking nothing away from the camera, the cinematography. That's what this movie is to me. I mean, I didn't connect with these characters whatsoever. And Harrison Ford, in my opinion, was a joke. Unbelievable, and like I don't know if he's hard to work with, but if he's not Han Solo, he's nobody. Or Indiana Jones. These big names in his repertoire. But it seemed like he didn't really give a shit about this movie as much. I mean, he literally walked onto multiple scenes with the same face, like the weird lip,
the noodle
thing,
face.
And I was like, "Come, Harrison Ford, come on, my man! Like you're way better than this." That's why, wholeheartedly, Roy, man, this guy, he lived that role. That final sequence where he's running around, almost like a Joker-esque kind of thing.
Yeah,
just like
he's hunting him.
but he's playing with him like Prey tends to do sometimes. Bat him around a little bit and see what they do. And at the end of the movie, Harrison Ford is running away from him half the time. So that also bolsters that there's no hero and there's no villain. And then at the end, where Roy actually saves his life, and then puts a dove in the air. That was kind of
that's the only part of the movie I have a problem with. It's like because they do set it up.
Or something?
They make
you set it up
way too polarizing for the lack of,
thank you,
of that dynamic range for the characters for the last 5 minutes for him.
He just catches this dove and carries it around with. Like,
I'm wondering, like, he's carrying like a chicken wing. You know what I mean? He's like got him flopping around
because
like, what's the fuck he gonna do? I thought he was gonna bite the head off like Ozzy or something like that. But
I guarantee you, what happened is like they're like, all right, for his final shot, we're gonna like pan to the sky and this dove. Like, where did the dove come from? Like, he had it the whole time. I promise.
No, there's no more doves on Earth where it's blackness in the whole movie. Now you come out this white. I mean, whatever.
I think the only way to explain that range of emotions falling under such a short period of time is that like he's obviously. So I'm gonna say real quick. I think another main theme of the movie is just fate. You know what I mean? Whether it's your fate as a human being or a robot who wants to sustain immortality, or a cop who's retired and his fate is to never really retire. I think at that moment when Roy was like he's shutting down and he stabs himself with a nail, like a 6-penny nail in the hand, and it's like. In that period of time, that kind of sums up why he would kind of flip the switch and grab Deckard's hand at the end and save him.
Right.
You know what I mean? From going from a psychopath to like these are my last breaths.
And I know I mentioned biblical, but I mean with that, spike in the hand, dove, saving a life. Here we go.
Well, I think
we got one more.
Oh, go ahead,
one more
ahead.
theme that I'll just add on to Shasti.
Yeah.
Time.
Okay.
Time. I mean, because these bots are only allowed to be on Earth for 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's why they're on this killing spree. So we're picking up themes across the board. So I guess human nature and time and death. It's all part of that whole scope. But sorry.
No, that actually leads pretty well into what I wanted to talk about, where that particular theme of mortality and time and just the temporal nature of humanity. I don't think Roy was ever intending to be like a murderer. I believe he killed because he felt he had to in order to survive, in order to try and meet his creator to get more time.
And to save Pris, his love interest.
Well,
in the movie, that's how it started.
I think
she needs more time.
Well, all three of them are three main androids, or three of the four main androids.
Right.
Leon, Pris, and
Zora.
Roy. They're they are just trying to survive, and this is a theme that has been prevalent in sci-fi for a really long time, but it was codified here to the point where even today, you look at Fallout, the video game series, and they've got subplots in almost every game about the synths, and those are essentially just the Nexus robots, and they talk about the humanity of the synths in the same way. So it's this sparked a lot of conversations in film and media that maybe we wouldn't talk about them the same way without Blade Runner. So it's very important in that manner.
I'm sorry, this is completely unrelated to what you said, but what you said for a second, like Roy and Pris were in love. I think that they're all the same entity. Like they're all like Zora was like the stripper one, for lack of better words, who Deckard takes out first, right? Like, just how they all kind of were talking about each other, even though there's not too many scenes with, you know what I mean? This like building arc, but it kind of seems like for the sake of them finding an answer for survival or immortality, or just to buy more time. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I looked at that as more like a love triangle or square.
Yeah, totally. They're just trying to save themselves from extinction.
Yes,
they know when someone else dies. Roy brings it up, like there's only 2 of us left, and she's like, we must be stupid. They're gonna kill us. Yeah. You know, so I guess that's one of those things. You know, you lose one, you lose them all. Kind of thing.
Well, I mean, we are incredibly lucky to have media like this where. We've talked about it before, utilizing the art and the story to kind of sneak under your defenses and really force you to think about some of these major issues. Like mortality is not a fun thing to think about, but
sounds scary.
It deserves its time in the limelight, and things like Blade Runner force you to address them without addressing them. So you can wax philosophical on, you know, like we said, the temporal nature of your life without necessarily putting it on you. You're giving yourself an avatar to be like, oh, Roy represents this, and this is how we can think about it. So you can get a lot of that stuff discussed. Yeah. And, you know, I think that Roy's final speech, that deserves a cheers.
Okay.
So our cheers this week
Put it on me.
will be a new drink. So we're calling this the Nexus 6. This is a much fruitier drink than you would expect with this dark topic. It's half an ounce of UV blue, half an ounce of Midori, half an ounce of blue curacao, half an ounce of apple puckers, half an ounce of grenadine, and an ounce of pineapple juice. Shake that bad boy up, pour it over rocks. It looks kind of dark and purpley like that.
Nexus 6.
Forgive me, is that 6 ingredients?
It is.
All right.
It is.
Oh.
Nice and juicy. Yeah. It's and I intentionally took ingredients that would look rough and gritty when you mix them together. Like this looks dark. But on the tongue, it's very light and flavorful, and it expands. And that's how I feel about this movie. It's very dark and gritty, but it expands the more it kind of gets inside you.
All right.
So there's our pairing for this week, the Nexus 6.
Dig it. So much like dark and gritty and things of that nature, we're set in 2019 in this film, aren't we, Josh?
Man, what a hellscape of a year that was.
It's so funny and such a query where
they almost made it look as bad as it really is.
It's like why do we have to have flying cars? Everybody abandons Earth. There's androids walking. We're sitting here in 2022. It's about to be spring, man. I'm seeing deer and wildlife, and we're still sitting here on Earth smiling. What is up with that?
Well, I mean, and I think it was Eddie Izzard that said all this technology and sci-fi, and what do we have? Those automatic doors at the grocery store.
No, I loved it. There's so much with the flying cars and the flames and stuff like that. And the guy's got his playback machine. It's still like a box set TV. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's one thing. You know, you overlook like the TV sense, but you got flying fucking cars.
Here's the thing. My favorite thing is to watch movies from the 80s that are take place in modern time and be like, how much did they get right or wrong? Because flying cars was obviously always a thing, right?
Yeah.
And if you think Back to the Future, a flying car takes you to the future or the past.
Yeah.
And the one thing they got right were the flat screens.
Yeah.
Like when you go to Biff's mansion, and like you see all the flat screens. But here I thought it was funny talking about the flying cars too, and the high rises, and it's almost like how Fifth Element, like the city, the streets are in the sky.
Yeah.
all the shots at the bars and like the liquor stores and like I also thought like the product placement was,
With the giant Coke banner.
yeah.
on
You had Atari, you had Coke, you had Schlitz.
Atari. It's
They
great.
had that.
Schlitz, so
What
fun.
was it, like a 40-story ad for that pill?
Yeah. And
yeah.
and there was like their version of a blimp flying around the whole time too. It looked like a space
Right.
station.
Right.
Where is it again? Oh yeah. So with the flying cars, all the shots were like Deckard's coming in and out of the bar in his car doing, the police paperwork shit. Like millions of people in the street. You know what I mean?
Yep.
People getting bogged. There's drunks walking out of the bar. It's just funny.
Right.
It's like still traffic on the ground.
Yeah, still broken ass
I don't know if
cars.
that was like a class separation like we were
Yeah,
talking
maybe.
about before, but it's just like I don't know.
Only
No,
police
it's-
can
it's
fly.
like-
Only
it's
police
in
cars
the-
can fly.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know why, but the 80s always seemed to think that the future was always going to be 1982 Tokyo, but really dirty.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess we talked like maybe it's like just the fallout,
Yeah.
the nuclear kind of mental thing where everything's gonna get wiped out. We'll start over, invent some flying cars, and
Well, it's kind of the opposite of anachronistic filmmaking.
meanwhile,
where,
Molly Ringwald's just dancing. On
right, where we have instead of things that are out of time, we have things from our time that just for whatever reason survive in the future. Fallout has this. Total Recall has this.
Yeah.
It's just the way we
Absolutely.
think about the future. And Ridley Scott personally has a lot to do with that because his vision of the future was just somehow elements of his present froze and everything else in the world evolved around it, and then it got worse. And Ridley Scott, it's appropriate that he made this movie because he's very much influenced by the author of the book, Philip K.
Yeah.
Dick, who, from all accounts that I've seen, he was a wonderful person, but very, very depressed.
Yeah.
So his understanding of the future was just things only get worse. So when we translate that to the screen, we have worlds without the sun. We have it's raining all the time.
Dystopian.
Just
and
yeah.
yeah.
Whereas
Not even like post-apocalyptic. It's
Right.
like where we got.
it's
to.
just
Yeah.
an urban nightmare.
based on his
Yeah.
pretty much. I mean, I hate to go back to the book again, but the whole Voight Kampf machine and this this empathy machine to tell you from a robot, and like they push the point how there's no animals that are alive more so than in the movie, but you kind of tell like the mental shape the man was in,
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
all these quizzes and answers that go way deeper in the
Yeah.
book, but
Yeah.
it's
It's really called like Mein Kampf too, when it's like so directly related with Mein Kampf. You know what I mean? They're trying to get to the inside
yeah
of like
Yeah.
a twisted kind of way. And that first sequence with Leon, that made me uneasy. Like the
Yeah.
questions that were asked and stuff, and how it progressed. I was like,
That's what they're
I'm
supposed
like,
to do.
oh,
Yeah. It's a
queasy.
long test.
Yeah,
that
and
makes
how
you
they went on and
uncomfortable.
went on. I thought that was a cool idea.
Well, and again, like this is the last time I'll go back to the book,
They, like,
and it's
work
the
together more.
only it's the only
They're-
thing
they're, they're more like main characters.
there's the empathy machine that Shassi's talking about in the book. They can like dial up whatever emotion they want to feel,
Yeah.
and it's kind of the flip of the humans are less human and the robots
Set a
are more human
frequency.
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the humans are using a machine to feel their emotions.
Right.
And then the robots
Okay.
just naturally express.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat apparent in the film because Deckard
It
is
was
always
the,
flat.
the eye,
Yeah.
the twitches and stuff like that, and just how the overall
yeah.
encompassing of their emotions come to be, and it's all in the eyes. And then real quick, they
Yeah.
said like be as quick as you can. Now they're almost too quick. The resolve is not there from human to
Yeah.
droid. Or
Well, and
whatever.
you look at, when Deckard, tests Rachel, he's like, it took you how many questions?
over 100. Yeah.
Over 100. How many does it normally take? 30 to 40?
Mm.
And the robots are becoming that much more empathetic.
Yep.
And the humans are just becoming
Less and
robotic.
less.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
that's that dichotomy where you instinctively want to root for Deckard because it's Harrison Ford. He's Han Solo. He's the American president. He's Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
But then you have Roy Betty, who is he's always a villain. Well,
Yeah.
not always. There's Lady Hawk, but he has that face that you just don't necessarily trust, and he's the most human character in the entire film.
And they make it a point early on, like when Deckard's getting drug out of retirement unwillingly, too. Like they push the point that the threat is that they're evolving more and more, that the robots are going to be able to teach themselves things that we didn't program.
That's what they
it's
wanted.
like it's like the downhill that the humans were going on that you're talking about. It's almost like that's the threat now. You know what I mean? Like they're in a position to even further themselves.
And how many movies have there been about like AI going beyond its intention? You know,
but this is almost like it's exactly the same in that sense, where it's a threat. They're gonna.
That's why they put a lifetime.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is it's like by the end of the movie, you see it's a threat because we're going the opposite direction.
Exactly.
And they're going a more human direction.
And that holds true today.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk flying cars and stuff, but that holds true. We're digressing as far as our overall intellect and critical thinking and just diving back in. Maybe
I disagree.
All right, well, you know what I mean. Not fully, but you know what I mean. Diving into our phones for answers and not being able to cite, not being able to do the basic work that goes into finding answers.
I think that'll all level out.
Yeah,
well, I think.
Hopefully.
Go ahead, Shasti. Go ahead.
I was just saying, from a time when our parents are like, we have baby boomer parents, for instance. Right. We were at the age when we were like teenagers. There was no internet to internet. There were no cell phones to cell phones and to smartphones. Where now it's like the smartphones are 10 times more powerful than what I knew a computer when I was.
But we can do the Dewey Decimal System.
No, I know, but it's like I've taught my parents so much shit about just like basic computer usage or. Google this recipe, or you know what I mean, to be resourceful. So like, I think with the drastic sudden change of that, there's a sudden. This is what we're telling our boomer parents to do. This is the way that. That's what I mean. There's going to be a switch that flips eventually, because it's like that's all that we're relying on now. It's like they have to kind of go back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
waves.
Yeah, it's waves, exactly.
And I think it's a very Cold War fear that we're seeing the residual effects of, because our fears of technology are based on the works of Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov, who and Ray Bradbury, who were afraid of not only technology but advancement. And they seem to think that if people stopped reading physical books, that they would stop being people, whereas they couldn't even fathom a future like we have today, where our phones are an extension of our own intellect.
Right.
And they allow us, for as much damage as the internet can accomplish, it can also do tremendous good. It can inform people. It can help you grow. Like, this show is on the internet. It allows us to get together once a week and really
get it down.
Oh, we forgot to
get
tell
it
you.
down.
Forgot to tell you.
Jeez, I'm out of here.
The future that they could not imagine, for all the crazy things that go on today, I think is better.
Than what it was, for sure. But I'm just saying the next step is this instant resourcefulness with the critical thinking that our parents do. That's what I'm getting at, and that's the other. I know we lied when we said we weren't going to bring up the book again, but there's a huge like social impact portion of the book, which correlates exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we are very rapidly approaching a point where we are the halfway point between the humans and the Nexus models, where AI can do so much, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it's not. We don't have to be afraid of the things we create, but a lot of this is ingrained in us because, religiously speaking, we assume that God is afraid of us. To draw from the great Robert Rodriguez in Spy Kids 2, do you think God stays in heaven because he fears the things he created on earth? That is the concept we're dealing with here in Blade Runner, is everybody except for the guy who creates these robots, except for JF Sebastian. Everybody's afraid of them. But Sebastian, he's like, there's a little bit of you in me, or me and you. And he finds great comfort in that. And I think that's the character we should latch on to. It's just this almost childlike innocence in a world of grime and crime.
Because as it lies, what we fear is lack of control.
Yes, very much so.
You know, that's the movie, that's life. That's what everybody's all the fear that we're living is what it is, you know.
Nail on the head, for sure. Now, I could go on for a long time.
I'm surprised actually because there's a lot more to draw than this movie.
But before we get to our next segment, Greg, I want to throw it to you just in case there's anything you wanted to throw out before we get to ratings. And stuff.
Basically, all I want to throw out, I think Ridley Scott did a great job. I guess I talked about depth and those still shots that like they're in my mind, like they're stamped down. And to add in Jordan Cronenweth, his cinematographer, who won a couple awards for this one as well. The lighting, the framework, the shadows, they all played a huge part in this movie. And that, in my opinion, was the entire movie. Because I didn't take a lot from what we talked about at this table. It was not how I watched this movie. It was, it seemed a little bit displaced and
fair enough,
hard to kind of follow at some points. I didn't like the acting as well. And like we talked about, it's not meant to be kind of a character growth type of movie, which is sci-fi is usually gritty, a little bit more less intuitive in some aspects.
I'm definitely more forgiving of that in the sci-fi realm.
Okay,
because sometimes it feels intentional.
Right, and usually my judgment of a movie is going towards that, like the character growth analysis, feel, emotion of the movie. Here, this movie, the only thing I loved about this movie was the cinematography, the camera work, the lighting, and how it was shot.
Yeah.
So I'm flipping my review on that base, just so y'all at home can know where I'm coming from.
Well, Shasta, any last thoughts before we get to Rotten Tomatoes?
No, I think he summed up what I was going to say as far as cinematography goes. I'm glad you kind of...
I had to in this one, for sure.
I know you had to. I feel like... I don't feel like that's all you had to latch onto, so that's what you latched onto, but I feel like you did take a step back and kind of, you know what I mean, put yourself into 82.
Right.
So the growth in this movie was Greg all along.
Oh, my goodness. Exactly. Wait, do we just gun it to 88?
Alrighty. So let's take a look at what the critics had to say about Blade Runner. All right, so critics gave this an 89, and audiences give it a 91.
Holy smokes.
As always, Greg, is that a heavy pour or a short pour?
Oh, man, that's
score?
heavy. That is so heavy, it's insane.
How heavy of a score?
Real heavy. Like I said, awards were made on cinematography and directing, but that's huge. I'm going 73 on this movie.
73.
Going
Holy
73.
cow.
I mean, it's because I disliked the acting and process so much. And like you guys brought back a book a lot of times. I don't judge off books. I don't judge off one single movie. You know, so that's where I land. And it's all due to the camera work.
Shasi?
I give Blade Runner 85. Knowing the book, I have a lot of gripes, but knowing how you have to kind of approach that thing from all the hurdles it takes to get someone to bite, you know what I mean, might be some of the stuff that was overlooked that I wanted to see. Trying to talk too much, but to set yourself up for a series as well is probably the other half of what I thought. You know, normally you say, "Oh, it's so much better the book because this was left out." No, this is better for how it's written. For a film, it's better to set itself up for what follows. So 85.
Yeah. I'm dead even with you. I think this is a slightly heavy pour. You know, I'm giving it an 85 as well.
Slightly.
But it's not too heavy of a pour. And I should preface this by saying, like, we forgot to say this up top. We watched the final cut. So there's 3 cuts of this movie. The first cut is dog. The second cut is but the final cut that was released in 2007 was the only one that Ridley Scott put his stamp on. Yeah. So that's the one that is generally recognized as the official cut of Blade Runner.
Watch out. It's restored. It looks way better.
Yeah. The visuals are much better. Yeah, and I think a lot of the story is amplified by the way they cut around some of the nonsense the studio wanted to put in. So the final cut, that's the only caveat. That's the star for me. That gets an 85. But audience, how do you feel? You want to drop down in the comments and let us know, was this a heavy pour or a short pour? Did we get it right? Did the critics get it right? Is everybody wrong?
Greg's right.
Greg's not right. Greg's not right. You know what to do. All the interaction is fantastic. We love hearing from you guys on every different platform. If you'd like to go any further, you can find the link to our Patreon down below. Other than that, it's pumpkin time, Greg. I gotta say goodbye.
He say you Blade Runner.